Modern theories of psychology and post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth can be used to explore how traumatic events can precipitate psychological changes in identity. According to the DSM-4 TR guidebook, post-traumatic stress can be defined as any witnessed or experienced event that involves or threatens serious injury or death and results in feelings of intense fear or helplessness. This also results in a later re-experiencing of these feelings, along with numbness, avoidance behaviors, hyperarousal, and impairment. Conversely, post-traumatic growth is described as a positive transformation resulting from coping and processing with traumatic life events. In the article Simulation of Substance and Shadow, Inner Emotions and Outer Behavior in Shakespeare's Psychology of Character, Keith Oatley relays, character in Shakespeare's conception has a center that grows from emotionally significant events that touch the person. King Lear begins the play accustomed to a position of political and social power. He experiences an abrupt remove from political authority and also the unforeseen contempt and disrespect from Regan and Goneril, his two inheriting daughters, when he divides his kingdom among them. This is compounded by King Lear's decision to cast his daughter Cordelia out of his life for failing to provide an elaborate assurance of her love for him. Lear experiences an emotional alienation that progresses to a physical alienation as well. Goneril and Regan's emasculating and forsaking behaviors prompt further instability within the aged Lear. He remarks, "I have full cause for weeping, but this heart shall break into 100,000 flaws, or ere I'll weep, O fool, I shall go mad." Lear withdraws and retreats from full cognitive awareness. His sense of agency becomes focused internally. He casts off his clothing and his precarious hold on sanity, giving way to inner chaos. Paradoxically, from this place of rational abandon, Lear can rebuild himself and begin to take empathy on those around him. In Alexander Welsh's article, A King Lear of the Debtor's Prison, Dickens and Shakespeare, on mortal shame, he remarks, "Now in extremity, with felt compassion for others and a direct identification with the supposed Bedlam beggar, comes a recognition that he can do without what humanity prides itself on, for King Lear begins to strip off his clothes." Lear's reunion with Cordelia is brief, long enough to break through his madness, to realize the love that Cordelia held for him as she lay lifeless in his arms. In the end, Lear was a man transformed. He held new priorities and new meanings for life. Lear experienced growth. Had he still been lost in his cognitive storm, he would have been shielded from Cordelia's tragic death, but his mind and his heart were opened by them, and he died grief-stricken but sane. Titus Andronicus begins with Titus as an aged and war-weary general of the Roman army. At the start of the play, he is a veteran already exhibiting signs of war fatigue. Soon Titus experiences additional traumas in personal and political identity, as well as physical injury, multiple family deaths, and the debilitating and violent rape of his daughter Lavinia. Once a celebrated war hero, Titus and his family have now been targeted for revenge. The society he once served obediently is now corrupt. However, Titus is able to realize that his automaton-like responses, which favor ongoing service to his country, cause his family strife. Instead of retreating inside of himself, he employs an external sense of agency aimed at seeking revenge for the injustices committed against his family. Titus instructs them, "You heavy people circle me about, that I may turn to each one of you and swear unto my soul to right your wrongs." Titus' actions in seeking revenge are extreme. However, to continue to blindly follow the direction of a corrupt social order would be erroneous as well. Titus uses radical means, but he is able to exact retribution for his family and ultimately restore order to Rome. Othello begins the play as a general of the Venetian forces, a man in control who is well-dressed, well-spoken, and educated. Othello is preyed upon by his jealous and scheming ensign, Iago, who uses his influence to disillusion Othello from his commitments to both his wife Desdemona and Othello's valued lieutenant Cassio, falsely suggesting the two are involved in a love affair. Othello remarks of Desdemona, "When I love thee not, chaos has come again." The deep passions Othello felt out of love have been turned into suspicion and hate, which indeed prompt a psychological chaos within Othello. Oatley remarks, "Shakespeare's idea of character is based on an ensemble of inner goals that are not necessarily coherent, but have an emotional center." Likewise, Othello becomes lost in his incoherent and emotionally laden goals. They consume him beyond logic, fed by the unreasonable voice of Iago. Othello is driven to destroy two people he loves out of false belief in dishonorable and unfaithful acts, while blinded by seeing the true act of unfaithfulness generated by Iago. Othello changes from a man thrown into violent passion by disillusion to a man who is sorrowful but knowledgeable of the betrayal made against him. Iago states early in the play, when he considers his planned acts of deception, "I am not what I am." This statement also becomes true for Othello, who must face transformations caused by his unfounded jealousy and realize that he was not who he thought he was. He is finally able to see the truth of the situation and his reactions to Iago that created a psychopathological shift in his identity. However, this newfound knowledge cannot bring back Othello's murdered wife, and it is in this realization that he takes his own life. The Tempest begins with Prospero as the rightful Duke of Milan, who has been usurped by his brother Antonio and banished to live on an island with his daughter Miranda. Years spent on the island have bent Prospero on revenge. He is reliant on power and control. He enslaves the help of Caliban, a savage of the island, and a spirit Ariel. Prospero, with the assistance he requires of Ariel, wrecks a boat upon his island containing those he has past grievances against. He orchestrates plans to separate, manipulate, and punish them. Prospero has reacted to his traumatic stressors with aggression and attempts to redirect his lost power through controlling others. Although years have passed, the memories of his injustices propel him through his actions. In the dark, backward, and abysm of time, the tempest of memory, Evelyn Tribble explains, the persistent figure of the brain as beating against the skull, on the edge of escaping or imploding, reveals the limitations of imagining the bounded subject and the fear that the loss of control should occur should memory be lost. Prospero's fear of losing control and his attempts to control others while he clings to his memories becomes his primary source of agency, blinding him from the truth of his actions. He proclaims, "I will plague them all, even till roaring." It is not until the final act of the play that Ariel is able to move Prospero to find empathy within him towards those he controls. Ariel appeals, "Your charms so strongly work 'em, that if you beheld them, your actions would become tender." This prompts Prospero to reflect and remark, "The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance." Prospero is able to recognize the human suffering he has created and reconnect with humanity. He employs empathy and releases his bonds on those he held captive. Prospero's refocus on forgiveness and reunification marks a transformative experience within him and signals growth. The experiences of humanity within 16th and 17th century plays by Shakespeare are still relevant to current psychological and social understanding. It is applicable today when considering soldiers, veterans, politicians, leaders, and anyone who has experienced trauma. The human psychological responses to trauma and the ability it has to prompt changes within identity are universal and timeless. Looking into the past can be a means of gaining insight into post-traumatic stress and hopefully the promotion of post-traumatic growth.